believable to you that Russia would destroy a dam and flood ethnic Russian villages and cut off a water supply to Crimea? I mean, that doesn't seem logical. It seems about as logical as blowing up one's own pipeline, doesn't it?
We've come to no conclusions on this. We're working with the Ukrainians. We'll try to get as much information as we can.
Strange how that clip hasn't blown up more online, in which a reporter, as you just heard, asked National Security Council spokesman John Kirby if it makes any sense for Russia to destroy a dam to flood ethnic Russian villages to cut off water supply to Crimea, and then she says it's about as logical as blowing up one's own pipeline in reference to the sabotage last year of the Nord Stream 1 pipeline that Russia was blamed for. Seemingly caught off guard a little, Kirby is forced to hedge, saying the U.S. is drawing no conclusions about the recent collapse of the Nova Kakhovka Dam. And that's funny because California Congressman Ted Lieu seems quite confident in accusing Russia of the war crime of blowing up the dam and saying it's long past time for Russia to be designated as a state sponsor of terrorism. Likewise, the president of the EU Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, tweeted, quote, "Russia will have to pay for the war crimes committed in Ukraine. The destruction of the dam, an outrageous attack on civilian infrastructure, puts at risk thousands of people in the Kherson region," end quote. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky is quoted today as saying the situation is an environmental bomb of mass destruction. That phraseology is very suspicious, as investigative journalist Michael Tracy notes. It falls in line with the term ecocide, which Tracy describes as an undeveloped legal concept, which has gained currency in recent months as this war has developed. He says if you go back to last month, U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland was meeting with members of the Specialized Environmental Prosecutor's Office of Ukraine in Washington, D.C. for training on investigating and prosecuting environmental crimes, which Tracy cites Garland as saying that this is another way in which to hold the Russian regime accountable. This comes as parts of investigative journalist Seymour Hersh's reporting on the Nord Stream 1 pipeline sabotage is going from conspiracy theory to almost everyday knowledge, as to so many anti-establishment headlines these days. Because the Washington Post is now out with a new piece claiming that a European intelligence service had given the CIA a heads up in June of last year, about 3 months before the attack, that Ukraine's military planned to attack the gas pipeline which connects Russia to Western Europe through Germany and the Baltic Sea. Does this mean the West is complicit in a foreign plot to attack our own allies' infrastructure in a bid to get them more involved in our proxy war against Russia? These are dangerous escalations, and yet Kirby is entirely dismissive of the very idea of nuclear war. Take a listen.
On Lavrov and his comments on F-16 fighter jets, he said that U.S.-built F-16 fighter jets can accommodate nuclear weapons, and warned that supplying Kyiv with them will escalate the conflict further to have a response.
The first thing I would say to Minister Lavrov is if you're worried about Ukrainian military capabilities, then you should take your troops and leave Ukraine.
Between his dismissive attitude and U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken mocking the very idea of peace talks just the other day, the situation's looking quite bleak for those of us who don't want the spooks, who don't want to play part of the spooks game and setting the stage for World War III. Joining us now to discuss is Clint Russell, the host of the Liberty Lockdown podcast. Clint, thanks for being here tonight.
Thanks so much for having me, Kara. Yeah, I'm imploring any sane people within our political establishment to start to get real about this conflict. It's really concerning that there's so much deception. Ultimately, you can read the Washington Post story and quickly identify the fact that the CIA was well aware of the Nord Stream attack a full 90 days prior, and that's the best case scenario. That's assuming that it was actually Ukrainian special forces that were responsible for that attack, as opposed to it being, Western forces themselves. It's crazy, but it ultimately it's an act of war. I mean, to blow up the Nord Stream pipeline, which provides an immense amount of natural gas to Germany, which is an actual NATO ally, as opposed to Ukraine, which is not. I think that that's an Article 5 violation. And if it is true, if the Washington Post is correct, which obviously I take it with a grain of salt, being that it's WAPO, but if it is true that that attack came from the Ukrainians with Western knowledge, that amounts to an Article 5 violation, and in some ways an attack upon an ally, a NATO ally, by the U.S. It's remarkable.